Hello, it's Bobby from Decoding here, and today I am going to start creating videos for a new playlist that I've put on YouTube, on my YouTube channel, and that is building and launching a real Django website. So this is the first video, and I was planning on creating a really long 2-3 hour behemoth video of how to start a project and get it to the point where it's out there on the web for the wider world to see it. But I've decided to break it down into little bite-sized videos and walk you through every single step that is necessary to build a Django website. Okay, so let's start. So the very first step that you need to do is you need to create a virtual environment. So I use a Windows machine and I've started a command prompt here, so a CMD, and it's already in my development directory. So you will need to set this up before you start this project. So we want to make virtual env, and we're going to call this did demo. And what that's doing, that is configuring a virtual environment in a directory, that a predefined directory in your machine. So I will do a video on my channel about how to set all of that up soon enough, but I haven't got it on there just yet. So if I show you my directories, if I go back to my own directory, Bobby, I've got one called env in here somewhere. Can't see the wood through the trees. Here we go. Right, envs. There we go. We've got one env in there. A virtual environment called did demo. So when we now pip install libraries, so when we install Django, that is where it will all go whilst on my machine. But when we launch it on a server, you will create a virtual environment within the server itself. So there needs to be some reconfiguration of the settings file to make sure that it works when it's on the server. But in development, this is how it works. So if we open up the CMD again, so now we want to pip install, because we've got the virtual environment there now, we now want to install the necessary libraries to then start a project. And the first one that you want to bring in is pip install Django. This is assuming you've already installed Python on your machine. You will need to do that first. So I'll probably cut the video here whilst it's loading and whilst it's installed and everything. Okay, that's all installed, which is great. You can see here on the CMD that we've got, it actually installed a few different libraries, because Django is reliant on a few other libraries for it to work correctly. We're currently using Django 3.2, and so it's using PyTZ, ASGREref, and this SQL parse. So now that we've got Django installed, we can now start a project. So we can now use the command Django admin start project, and we want to call this did demo, which is the same as the env. You don't have to do that, but we do. It's common practice, because otherwise you would need to, when you are firing up the virtual environment, you would need to use command work on virtual environment, and that you really want the project to be named exactly the same. It just means it's a lot easier for you to get your head around when you're working in the development environment. So if we now look in the directory, so I've got a development directory here, and if we want to look into where are we? Did demo. You can see now we've got a Django project, and the directory, actually I'll open up a Sublime Text. So open folder. I don't want that one, I want did demo. I'll just drag that over to my other screen. There we are. Okay, so you can see here that we've now got, so we've got a did demo directory, and then with it, when you start a project, what you get is a manage.py file in the main directory, and then it adds another directory called did demo, and then in that you have an init file, you have an ASGRE, you have a settings.py, a urls.py, and a wsgi.py. So you don't need to change any of these, other the ASGI and WSGI. You don't need to change those, and you don't need the manage.py file. Leave them as they are, but we will be configuring settings and we will be configuring urls.py. So if we go back into the command prompt, now what we can do, we can now cd into did demo. And the first thing I like to do is I like to create a requirements.txt file, and this is where we will add all of the libraries requirements that are going to be used in this project. And what we do is we use a command called pip freeze. We point it towards requirements.txt, and that will create the file. So we've now got a text file here called requirements, and it will have in there all of the packages that we've just pip installed. So this is new actually. We're using Django 3.2. 3.1.7, which was the last Django version I was using, doesn't come with typing extensions. So it comes, when you install Django, this is standard in 3.2. And if you pip install any other libraries and then do that same pip freeze requirements.txt, this will extend. So this will just add the libraries, the necessary libraries for it to work. So if we go into setting.py and open up the command prompt, in this demo we're going to have an app called main. So we want to go Python manage.py start app, and we want to call this main. And what happens is that will create a new directory in here called main, and it has a migrations directory and a few other sort of admin apps, models, tests and views. Now as you build out your applications, you will add more files such as mixins, URLs, you'll have signals. There's a whole range of different files that you can use, but this is what comes straight out of the box of Django. So what we want to do, we're now in the settings.py file. This video will be all about updating the settings file and the URL file. We won't do anything else in this video. That will be in the other videos of this tutorial. So we want to import OS, and the reason we want to do that is because we are going to use static files in this project and media files. And we need to import OS that we can explicitly say where the static URL and static root is. So that's import OS. In this settings file you have the base directory, so it builds a path inside the project like this. You have a secret key, so this is unique to the project in Django. We will be decoupling that key and using a Django library called Django decouple. And what that does, it brings out and decouples all of the sensitive information from your project, and you can have it in a file that doesn't sit within the same directory, which is great for security. You have debug equals true, so when you're in development, that equals true. When you go into production, you put it in false, and that means that by being in true, when you have something like a server error or a 404, you get a debug screen come up on your browser, which enables you to debug and find out exactly what the problem was. When it's debug false, you don't get that, which is what you want, because you don't want that information to be displayed to the wider public. Allowed hosts, we'll be using that when we go live. So in there we would put the server IP address or the domain name for the project. Installed apps, so these come straight out of the box for Django. So you've got admin of content type, sessions, messages and static files. We want to now add the app main that we've just created using the command prompt. So we want main.apps, and I believe with Django 3.2 you can actually refer to this main config differently, but I haven't read the docs on that yet. So it's main apps, it's main config, and that will still work. And if you go into apps.py in the main directory, this is what we're referring to. So it's the main config here. Just make sure I was putting that in there correctly. And always remember to put your trailing comma, because if you forget, it bugs things up. This is your middleware. This comes straight out of the box. Don't change that unless you're installing an app that means it's necessary to add another library to the middleware. The root URL conf, leave that as is. Templates, you won't need to change that unless you're stipulating where the template directories are. I never need to change those templates. You won't need to change this variable. Database, we will be changing that later on in the project to PostgreSQL, but straight out of the box it uses SQLite, which is a very lightweight SQL database. We then got auth password validators. We won't go into those just yet. Language code, I'm in the UK, so I changed that to GB. Time zone, use I18N, and you've got these other variables. These straight out of the box. We don't need to change much of many of those. But what we will do is we're going to be using static and media files in this project. So we will change these variables here. So what we want first off is we want to add a URL a media URL. So we'll use that exactly as it is there, but we'll change it to media, and we'll change this to media. Then we want static files DIRs, and this is a list. And then there, this is where we refer to the OS, so operating system dot path dot join, and then we want to join the base directory, and we want to call this we want to static. There we are. Underneath that we then have don't forget your comma, it is a list. We want os.path.join, and then this one we want base directory, and this one would be media. Great. And then lastly we want static root. Oh, we don't want that. And this is os.path.join base directory again. But this one we want to have it as static CDN. And lastly, I've got a bit of a delay here. This one can be media root. And change that to media CDN. And that is it. We don't need to change any more of the setting.py file. This variable has just been added to 3.2, so I don't even know what that is. So it's a default auto field. So I'll need to read the docs on that before I can talk about that. I don't know much about it, but we have got a link here, which we'll look at later on in this project, but we won't look at it now. But this has popped up over the last couple of days since Django has released their 3.2 version. So now we want to go, that's settings.py done, so you want to save those changes and then go into URL. So this is straight out of the box, no changes have been made to this file just yet. So after path, from the Django.urls library, we want to import path, which we do anyway because we're already using that in the URL patterns. We also want include. We want to bring in the settings library from Django.conf import settings. We also want the static library from django.conf.urls.static import static. There we are. And then all we need to change here, we need another URL in the URL patterns to encompass the main app, so the URLs that we'll be pulling from main. So this will be path, and we want include, just make sure I get my syntax right. So yeah, it is. So we want main URLs. We haven't got this file yet, but we'll make that in a second. Main.urls and namespace equals, this will be main, and that's it. That's all we need currently in the URLs, but we now need to stipulate in here what we do with static and media. So we want if settings.debug, so if we're in debug mode, which is generally development, then this is how we handle the static URL. So it's URL patterns, we want a plus equal, so we want to add to the URL patterns list that we have there, and this is static, and it's settings.static underscore URL. So that's what we put in the settings file, static URL, and we want document root equals settings dot static root, and that's all there is to it. We then want another one for media. Now this will be handled slightly different when we are in production. In fact, we will remove this media line, but whilst we're in development, we'll keep it in here. All will become clear when we put it on the server and we have a working website. And that is the URLs in the, so URL conf. And so we will need a URLs file in the main app here. So start new file, and we'll save this as urls.py in main. So come out there, go into there, it should be urls.py. And what we want in this one is, we want from Django.urls import path, and then we want app name. This is what we're referring to when we call it main in the main conf directory. That's all we need. We won't configure any URLs just yet. And that's it. That is the end of this video. We won't go into any more depth in this one, but the next video we'll start building out, what should we put? We'll do the one-time passwords for admin. So straight out of the box, Django has an admin page which allows staff and super users to log in and manipulate objects. We are going to extend on that and add one-time passwords. I do already have a video about how to implement one-time passwords in the Django admin on my YouTube channel, but we're going to do that and add that into this project in the next video. Thank you very much for watching. Please subscribe and like, and I will see you in the next video. Thank you.